Welcome to the Susan Brender Show. It's all about you. Featuring shows on health and wellness, the performing arts, politics, and people who inspire you to be your very best. And now, here's Susan Brender.
I'm Susan Brender, and this is the Susan Brender Show. Today, a friend of our show is on again, and I'm always so happy when he comes on because there is no question that Michael Solomon is just full of all kinds of thoughts and ideas and opinions about various things dealing with politics and various other subjects. And today, the Motivator, as he's called, who was a former New York City Police Department Special Investigator and best-selling author, and I want him to talk about his books too, because let me tell you, if you want to really get good reading under your belt, this author has 3 incredible books. So with that said, let's introduce Michael Solomon. And Michael, I want to welcome you to my show again and always be a guest of ours because people find you fascinating.
Good morning. How are you this morning?
Well, I'm fine. The subject that I really want to deal with this morning is impeachment because, you hear people talking about it with such passion. Some people are saying, oh, my God, let's get that guy out of here. They hate him. They absolutely hate him. And I'm just curious, why would you hate somebody so much? With that said, so give a definition of the word impeachment. What really does impeachment mean?
Well, in impeachment, believe it or not, our founding fathers, Madison, Jefferson, everybody, they put that in the Constitution based on English rule from the English Parliament, which really goes back to the late 1300s. Actually, it was 1386 when Parliament wrote it. And it deals with removing somebody in an executive position who has really just committed high crimes and misdemeanors. Their offense in high crimes and misdemeanors was off the wall. It could have been anything. It could have been threatening a grand jury, disobeying an order from Parliament at that time. And it just can't happen today because there's so many things going on. So, for example, in Congress today, let's say Congress passed a law and the president refused to enact. Well, things are a little bit different because according to the Constitution, the president has veto power. Okay, so let's say Congress passes a law and the president vetoes it. Then Congress goes back. They can override it. If they override it, it can then become law, and the president must sign it, and he must act upon it. Well, if he refuses at that point, that would be an impeachable offense. That would be considered a crime, but not right. a felony, but it certainly would be considered a misdemeanor. For example, let's say they passed some tax increases. The president vetoed them, and Congress went back and overrode the veto, and now he refused to implement the tax increases. That's impeachable. Because he's not following the rule of law and he's not following what Congress wants. So that's basically what it is. If we go back to the early days of our founding fathers, Benjamin Franklin asserted that the power of impeachment was necessary for those times when the executive, in this case considering the president or vice president, was criminal and obnoxious. Well, there's no criminality in today's obnoxious maybe, but
that's right.
But obnoxious in those terms is different than So regular impeachment of an executive when his conduct should deserve it is honorable according to what it is. But what he also said was that impeachment of an executive when in his conduct is honorable, that it should be an acquittal, and he should not, especially when he's unjustly accused. And I think that presently President Trump is being, unjustly accused because they're hiding all this testimony that seems to be in his favor. I don't know. I'm just listening to both ends. I mean, Madison then went on to say that impeachment was vital to defend the community against the incapacity or negligence or treachery of a chief magistrate or single, or an executive such as a president.
Sure.
But he also argued that unlike legislative and collective nature provided security for loss of capacity. Well, we have that in the 25th Amendment, where if a president is considered incapacitated for one reason or another, if God forbid he has a stroke or he's mentally incapacitated. That's another reason. But but that's basically it. But according to the Constitutional Rights Foundation, prior to the Clinton investigation, the House had begun impeachment proceedings, believe it or not, against only 17 officials in the United States in 240 years.
Yeah, that's what I was about to ask you. How many presidents, as far as I know, Andrew Johnson was the president that was impeached. But
Johnson was impeached, all right, but people don't realize why he was impeached. He was impeached.
Well,
if I tell you why he was impeached, people don't read the history books. Johnson was impeached based on rude speech, which reflected badly on the office. Comments about Congress, questioning its legal authority, refusing to follow laws, and Congress was diverting funds allocated in the Army for appropriations outside of the Army, which we needed. I mean, the Civil War just ended, and they needed, the Army had to regroup and whatever. Mm-hmm. And the acts that they brought against him were considered to be, an absolute disgrace. So he was never removed from office. Everybody thinks impeachment means you're removed from office. Hey, Nixon was impeached. He wasn't removed from office. He resigned. Right. Clinton was not removed from office. He went on and won re-election. So it's a very touchy, narrow, slippery road to go down. But,
it's a saga, essentially. It really is. Now, should the Democrats proceed quickly to write articles of impeachment on what is already known, should they continue? They can't.
They can't. There's no crime, high crime, or misdemeanor. What's the high crime? There was no quid pro quo. I read that transcript 22 times. I mean, I went over it and over and over it, and I'm looking in there for the high crimes and misdemeanors. There was nothing in there. It was a conversation between a president of two countries, Ukraine and the U.S., and that was it. They talked about corruption. The president said that he wanted him to look into corruption, and he was glad that he was elected, and he's going to fight corruption there. And by the way, can you look into this tech company that was supposedly trying to interfere with the last election, and that was it. And then he said, and by the way, we also had something that came up with Hunter Biden and Joe Biden, and that was it. Now that's right. Where did he get that? He got that from public information. Joe Biden went on TV in an interview and said that he coerced the president of Ukraine at the time to fire an investigator. Or he was going to withhold $1 billion in funds. I mean, give me a break. There was no withholding of any funds that the president said, but, it's crazy. I mean, I'm not trying to quote the president, but it is a witch hunt.
Which of the many accusations against the president make the strongest grounds for impeachment? I mean, because there's accusation after accusation, so there must be some strong grounds for impeachment from the point of view of the Democrats anyway.
Nothing proven. There was an accusation Russia interfered with the election and Trump coerced with them. That didn't happen. I mean, we had a 2-year report from Mueller, and he couldn't find any coercion. There was no conspiracy there. I mean, if anything, the evidence is going to come out this week once the Inspector General report comes out, and we're going to see exactly what the problem was with the Russian investigation. The problem is that they have to go back to the FISA courts, and they have to find out where the dossier came from. And the only problem is that the judges in the FISA court are secret. Nobody knows who they are. So it's a secret court. And they're not going to, they can't out them, and that's basically it.
Excuse me for interrupting. It leads me to the question of, will the public opinion move enough to cause some Republican senators to abandon Trump? Because, I mean, it sounds like, from my point of view, that everybody, it doesn't matter on which side, there are people in this government that are looking, they love their power, and in fact, some of them are looking to move up. And there could be some Republican senators who are going to try to abandon Trump as a result.
I don't know how they're going to abandon him. What would they be concerned about? If they stick to their principles and their governmental oath that they took when they were sworn in, they can't. I mean, show me the high crime and misdemeanor. There was no quid pro quo in that telephone call, and that's all they've got. They keep saying quid pro quo, quid pro quo. They've had secret testimony by the former ambassador, And where did they hold it? They held it in the basement of a building, in the basement of, what is this, Russia, where they lock you in a basement and they tie you to a chair and they question you for 10 hours. That's exactly what they did, if you think about it. I mean, why, if the public wants to know what's going on, you have an open hearing in an open Congress, and what do they've got? They've got a committee of 12, 15 people that are doing all this questioning. What about the other 223 or 25 members of Congress that have to hear this testimony and hear these the testimony so that they can make up their mind? What are you gonna do? You're gonna cherry pick what you want and present it before Congress? You can't do that. This is America. Whatever happened to the rule of law, where everything is open, where it should be? You know, you have a right to question the witnesses against you. You have a right to cross-examine. I don't get it. They're changing the rules every Monday and Tuesday. You get a guy like Adam Schiff who gets up in Congress and makes up a scenario of a transcript of a phone call. He rewrote it and made it so it would sound like there was a criminal contempt there. And when you read the transcript and you read what Adam Schiff said, you say to yourself, "Oh my God, this is like this is day and night." I mean, aren't the American people? When do they wake up and just see what's going on? I mean, it's ridiculous.
Yeah, but Michael, you know, there must be something about this president, and I'm understating and not overstating it here, that provokes, if you will, this animosity and all this hatred toward Trump. Is it the style by which he kind of presents himself, the fact that he doesn't sound so smart when he speaks, or maybe he just speaks too honestly like the average person, and people can't accept the fact that our president sounds like somebody who really I don't even know how to put this, who really doesn't deserve the post of presidency, because they're used to somebody like Obama, who was so sophisticated and so charming, and Trump is the opposite, and maybe that's why.
Trump is doing two things, and are there things that he says that I have to hold my nose about? Absolutely. I mean, there are things that I say to myself, "Oh my God, why don't you just shut up already?" I mean, think about this: if we didn't have Twitter, we didn't have social media, and we're back to say 40 years ago, and how are they going to affect this man? But here's the problem. From the day he was elected, Susan, the very next day, you had half of the Democrats were screaming, "We have to impeach him, we have to impeach him." I mean, from that day forward, they came up with all these phony narratives. The Russia collusion was a joke, and he didn't have a chance even he wasn't even sworn in, and they were talking impeachment. I mean, for what? They had a couple of unproven allegations about some sexual trysts at the time. They still don't have any Daniels. I mean, her attorney went to jail. The money was written out of his account. They say it came from the president. We don't know that. They came up with two other people who were absolutely proven wrong, but they haven't prosecuted them. They should have for perjury. You can't do that. I mean, 50 years ago, if somebody made a statement like that against the president of the United States, they would have been arrested. But I mean, even a congressperson. I mean, it's ridiculous what's going on. So they started this from the beginning. You got to understand something about Trump, because I did work with him for his organization when I was in the business in New York. He's a street fighter from New York. I don't know if you know much about street fighters from New York, but here's the way they work. You hit me once, I hit you back twice as hard, and you're going to lose. He's not used to losing. And everything he's done, everything he's promised the American people, he has been doing. You know, they're fighting him on everything he was. If Trump came out yesterday or a year ago and said, "You know what, I changed my mind, I'm not going to build the wall, and I don't care about the southern borders," Congress would jump all over him, says, "We got $30 billion to build a wall, why don't you build it?" You know, I mean, but no, he wants to do it. Now they're against anything he says. You know, I made a statement about 6 months, almost a year ago on national TV, and they asked me what about. I said, you know, if Trump got up in the morning and decided to take a walk and walked across the Potomac River, the New York Times would have a major headline the next day that Trump doesn't know how to swim. I mean, it's getting out of control. I mean, why don't they just let the man do his job and let the American people decide? And that's going to happen on Election Day. I don't know what's going to be, but we'll see what happens.
Well, that brings me to the question, and actually there's two parts to my question, which is what will happen in the election of 2020 and beyond as a result of all of this, because, that's a question. 2020 is coming up. And also, the other point that I wanted to make is, let's assume that his name wasn't Trump. His name was Jones, okay?
Right.
Would all of this be happening because maybe the name Trump has been around for so long, and a lot of people hold it against him because they say he had a silver spoon put in his mouth, and so as a result they think, he's this rich boy who was able to buy himself into the presidency. So think about it from the standpoint of, again,
he really bought himself into the presidency. He spent about $300 million running a campaign that Hillary spent over $1 billion. Who bought what into who? The problem is, this is the first time in the history of this country that a billionaire walked into the White House as president. And I don't know if it's jealousy or what, but maybe the country needed it for over the years. They finally needed somebody in there who was a businessman who get things straightened out. If you ran this country like a businessman and like a profitable business, maybe things would get squared away. But who knows? But this is the first time in the history of this country that a businessman has ever been elected, and has run a business and knows what it is and knows how to negotiate. I mean, what he's doing with China right now, this is the first time in the history of this country that we finally decided that, enough's enough for China. And he's laid it out on the line with them, and he's got them hurt. He's got them squirming. Okay?
Well, but Michael, the other thing is, from my point of view, he's raising the level by which all of our stocks are going up, and that's a very good thing. And you would think that the average person who has something in the market would be very excited. But instead of saying, well, this man is helping our financial situation and our savings, they're going in the opposite direction. He's helping the rich. I'll
give it to you in one sentence, Susan. Okay?
Okay.
Name one person in this country, okay, who's ever worked for a poor person.
Good point. I can't argue that. I can't think of it.
Who creates the jobs? Okay, here's what they come out with. Well, the rich are going to take all their tax savings and they're going to go out and they're going to buy big fancy cars and boats and airplanes. Well, guess what? Who's going to build those cars and those airplanes? Bankers? The investment brokers? The rich? No, they're going to put people back to work. They're going to open up factories. The average person that's saving about $2,000 a year on his income tax, okay, he's going to finally be able to turn around and say, you know what? That refrigerator we've been putting Band-Aids on for the last 5 years, we can go out and buy a new one. So we're going to spend $1,100 or whatever. We're going to buy a new refrigerator or a washer and dryer, or we're going to get the air conditioning fixed in the house. Who's going to fix the air conditioning? Who's going to replace those refrigerators or those washers and dryers? Who's going to build them? Who's going to go back to work in the factories and build that stuff? Not the bankers, not the people saving more money. So what's the problem? And if we absconded, I listened to Elizabeth Warren and Bernie and the rest of the Democrats that are running out there. They want to tax wealth. We have never taxed wealth in this country. Never. If I earn $1 and I pay 25 cents in income tax, okay, and that 75 cents gets invested, and I make another $1 out of that 75 cents, that other $1 is taxed. They want to go back and tax that 75 cents that I had left after I paid all my taxes on it and used it for my own benefit. That's ridiculous. We never tax wealth in this country. Ridiculous. And all these people that say, well, he's only for the rich. Look at your 401ks. Look how rich you're going to be down the road if it keeps up. I mean, the market's up again today. It was up yesterday almost 500 points. I mean, it's absolute. People don't have any common sense. They don't look at the trickle-down effect of all of this.
Yeah.
It's absolutely ridiculous.
Well, probably that's because Donald Trump has a tendency to simply say what comes into his head. But I have that question also.
I would sometimes his mouth runs ahead of his brain, but you know what? He's saying things that people believe and people like. Look at his base. I mean, where do you see anybody, any politician in this country go into an arena and have 30, 40, 50,000 people fighting to get in there? I don't mean physically fighting, but, struggling to get in to see him and to cheer him on. In my lifetime, I've never seen that. And I've been to a lot of presidential elections.
Sure. But does he have a political strategy, Michael? I mean,
tell it like it. I think his political strategy is very simple. Just tell it like it is and expose the other side for what they are. Mm-hmm. I mean, if Elizabeth Warren gets elected, does half of what she said she's going to do, this country will go down the tubes financially.
Yeah.
Medicare for all, forget about it. You can't. I mean, ridiculous. Bernie Sanders says, Cuba and Canada have better health care. Then, okay, how come when he had his heart attack he didn't fly to Canada or down to Cuba? Come on. We have the greatest health care in the world in this country, next to Israel. I think Israel's got better. And half of what's happening in Israel we're using over here. They developed the MRI and the CAT scan and everything else. So why are people coming to America to get their health care? The problem we have is a health insurance problem. We don't have a health care problem. Health care has never been greater in the life in this country. I had a friend of mine went in and had a valve replaced in his heart, and he was out of the hospital the next day, and they punched a little hole in his groin, and that's how they did it. I mean, God, they would normally, years ago, they would have to cut you open from your neck to your belly button and replace it. I mean, it's unbelievable.
Yeah. So to finish up this point about Trump, if you were just on a show and they said, I want you to give me one statement why Trump, why one should support Trump, what would your answer be to that?
I'll give it to you in a nutshell. Out of all the candidates that I've seen, he cares about the little people, the working class, and he loves America. That's the way I see it.
Well, that's a good way to finish up the discussion. I hear you. Which leads me, and we don't have a lot of time, but there are two subjects that enter my mind at the moment, and of course we don't have time to talk about them, but we'll do them in another show, is the word immigration, and of course the other word is climate change. Just give us one statement that is Michael Solomon's thoughts about immigration.
I have no problem with immigration if you do it legally. I mean, look how many people are online waiting to get in who have hired attorneys and filing papers and doing it the right way. And then you've got people walking across the border. We can't afford these people. Look what's going on in California. Look at San Francisco. Look at the streets, what's going on out there. And you know what? Oddly enough, most of those people are not illegal immigrants. And by the way, you can't say illegal immigrant anymore. You got to say undocumented. That's like calling a drug dealer on the corner an unlicensed pharmacist.
Good one.
That's the way I look at it. But it's ridiculous. I mean, you want to come into this country. We don't have a problem you coming in and working here. We'll give you permits. We'll give you visas. Just do it the right way. Get online. And you know what? The people who are immigrants who are in this country, whether they're from the South American countries, Mexico, South America, Middle America, or from anywhere else, Chinese, Japanese, it doesn't matter where they're from, who've come here legally, who are working. Do they want these people coming in and taking their jobs for cheaper wages and such? Mm-hmm. Of course not. And the drugs that are coming across the border are ridiculous. I mean, when you see the stuff that's coming across, the seizures last week, they seized God knows how many tons of cocaine and fentanyl that were coming across from Mexico. There was a truckload of, something like 60 tons. There was enough in there to kill every American in the country. But it's ridiculous. We've got to do it right. And the diseases are coming over. I mean, if you look what's going on we've got cases of leprosy, Ganji fever. I wrote an article a couple of years ago called "It's Time to Close the Petri Dish," and it was called. The title of the article was "The Next Andromeda Strain." It was an op-ed, and in the article I said, "What is America waiting for? The first case of Ebola?" And it didn't take 2 years, so we had 2 cases of Ebola in this country that came in from Africa, from somebody sneaking into the country. I mean, God forbid we ever had an outbreak of something like that in this country. It would be ridiculous. Tuberculosis rates are increasing in the southern borders like you can't believe. Even in New York, it's happening. So look at all, you had a measles epidemic, so people aren't being vaccinated, but somebody had to come in with the measles first.
Yes. All right, which leaves me to ask the last question, and that is, just give me one thought on the idea of climate change. Do we have climate change?
Do we? Yeah, we have climate change. It happens naturally. It's got nothing to do with man. I'll give it in one word. Break the word down into syllables. Allegory. Does it sound like somebody we know? Allegory. Al Gore.
I hear
you know the definition. You know the definition of allegory. One of the definitions is it's a story or poem or picture that can be interpreted to reveal a hidden meaning, typically a moral or political one. Al Gore earns approximately $200 million a year in green energy deals and brokering carbon credits.
So you're talking about money.
It's all money. Wall Street Journal and Forbes magazine said that Al Gore will probably become the first billionaire in climate change on selling something that can't smell, touch, or taste. And those are carbon credits.
Well, we have plenty of time. Hopefully, you do. I know I do in the future to address this situation. But I just want you to tell our audience about your books. What books do you have now available?
Well, I've got
what's coming up?
I've got 3 that are already out there. They were bestsellers, and I've got 2 that are in print right now. One is at my publisher. One should be finished up. It's being edited right now, which is a business book. But my first book was Success by Default, The Depersonalization of Corporate America, and it was a business book that Forbes said should be on the desk of every CEO in the country. My second book, which was a political expose titled Where Did My America Go?, is the book that actually launched the Tea Party movement in America. I held the first Tea Party in 2007. When I wrote that book and it was published in 2006, I called for a Tea Party on Flag Day 2007. Barack Obama was still in the Illinois Senate. He just won an election. He won an election to the U.S. Senate 6 weeks after my book was published. So the Tea Party has nothing to do with him. Of course, it was basically hijacked away from me, became something different after that, and I fell out of it. But the first Tea Party I held, we had 1,600 people show up. Wow. And then my third book, which was fiction, which was scary fiction, because what happened was most of it's come true since I've wrote it, was called The Conversion Prophecies, the Islamic takeover of the world without firing a shot. They basically buy it. It's an economic thriller. And a couple of things in the book that I had wrote about, one including that they were raising money through a secret illegal pharmaceutical house in Iran and owning the cartels in South America and pumping in $12 billion a month in illegal drugs to the United States. It turns out that about a year after the book was published, they found a memo that President Obama had sent to the DEA to stop a investigation on a secret pharmaceutical house in Iran, and that's what that shook a few things up and say myself. Somebody said to me on TV once, "How did you know?" I says, "I didn't." It was all conjecture. It was conjecture when I wrote it, and it turned out to be true. And then my next 2 books, one is a love story entwined around a medical mystery. It's another novel, something that I've wanted to write for years, and then I've got another business book coming out. The working title right now is Mental Agility, How to Shape Your Mind for Greater Success. So we'll see what happens. That should be out by January. I can't let any grass grow.
Yeah, there you go. I hear you. Well, my guest today has been Michael Solomon, the author of 3 books, and now 2 more are coming out. And Michael, if they want to buy them, of course, are they on Amazon and available?
Yeah, they're all on Amazon. If anybody wants any further information, you go to my website, www.successtalkinc or michaelsolomonbooks.com, either way, and they'll be able to read all about them, and they can learn a little bit more about me.
Always a pleasure to have you on the show, Michael, and let's do something again very, very soon. So I want to thank you again. And audience, please be aware that every time you listen to Michael, you learn something new. So it's been really, as always, a pleasure.
Well, thank you, Susan. You have a wonderful day.
Thank you for listening to The Susan Brender Show. To be a guest, email sebrender@yahoo.com.